Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my fellow science enthusiasts. I hope you have all buckled up because we're in for a ride. And no, it's not a ride through space. So today we're looking at Ridwan's longest video. Just get some popcorn, I guess.
Some people might not agree with one or two of these mistakes. Others will wonder why other mistakes are left out. I try to focus only on those that are really strong mistakes.
Please do note that before we begin with any refutation, this video is not meant to show that the Quran is a scientific miracle. In fact, those of us who have been working on this channel disagree with such a notion in the first place. This video is also not meant to show a definitive interpretation of the Quran, as much of the content that Ridwan has made pertains to verses that are ambiguous, mutashabihat, whose meanings are in the end ultimately known in their entirety only to Allah, as is in accordance with verse number 7 in Surah 3. Science generally is of a changeable nature, and although it is a great method for gaining knowledge about the known universe, it is not a measurement of determining absolute truths or sometimes even truths in the conventional meaning of the word in the first place. We use science to come up with conclusions that are susceptible to change due to certain factors such as the inductive method. This video is meant to refute apostate prophets' claims that it is impossible to make scientific or rational sense of the Quran. We begin by commenting on the types of arguments Ridwan makes in this vid. We can basically divide our answers into 4 categories that will get rid of those points which he makes in the video that are irrelevant. The 4 categories are: Category 1. Non-science. Those arguments that have nothing to do with science. For example, number 60. Ridwan makes the claim that the Quran is scientifically inaccurate because it says that the heaven has been adorned with stars, that the stars are an adornment. He then argues that the stars are huge in size and therefore cannot be an ornament or an adornment. We simply respond by saying, the size of an object does not take away from its beauty. Something being called an ornament doesn't mean it has to be a small Christmas light. Many writers in history have used the word adornment to describe natural phenomena that they are amazed with. This has nothing to do with the size of the object. Category number 2. The points which have been already refuted. This refers to those claims that have been refuted in our previous videos. Category number 3. Allah is the ultimate and direct cause. This refers to those points which can be simply addressed with by saying that we as Muslims believe Allah is the direct causer of all events. Let's take as an example point number 15. It is stated that Allah steers the ships of the human beings. All this means is that the realities of the ship moving, rotating, and etc. are directly brought into reality by Allah alone. Imam al-Ghazali, the 12th century Islamic philosopher, elaborates that just because 2 or more events precede or follow each other, such as a wind moving and a ship moving along with the direction of the wind, does not imply that the wind is the cause of the ship's movement. All this means is that God creates a continuity in reality. The same logic applies for the other points, like in point 16. Despite us seeing the continuous reality of a bird's muscle strength, its wing structure, and the functioning of pressure enabling it to fly, we believe that all of these are separately continuously caused by Allah directly, and not by each other, including the flight itself, which to our naked eye seems to be the product of the mentioned continuities. Category 4. Judgment Day. This category pertains to those points where Ridwan claims impossibility of certain events, even though those events ought to occur on Judgment Day, which is a period in time when realities shifted and changed. Not only that, but this category refers to those events that are ontologically possible, but Ridwan calls them impossible without substantiating that claim. For example, number 26. Ridwan claims that mountains cannot be pounded and scattered into ash and cannot be moved from their place. First of all, there is nothing inconceivable about a mountain being destroyed and scattered into ashes. Every mass of matter can be transformed into a different mass of matter. Ridwan fails to understand that Muslims believe God is omnipotent and that this means God can do anything, wherein the word thing refers to any possible existence. Impossibilities are contradictions in terms, such as a squared circle or an existing non-existent thing. Ideas about inconceivabilities that cannot exist, as they are not things in the first place. Moreover, such a reality of mountains being scattered happening on the Day of Judgment is no surprise, as the Day of Judgment is a period of immense manifestation of God's attributes of mercy and wrath, where huge changes in reality will occur to demonstrate God's superiority over creation. As for the other points, we're going to address them individually. In order for Ridwan, or for anyone else for that matter, to disprove the Quran using science, 2 things must be in place. First, the science that is being used must be certain. Second, the Quranic verse that supposedly conflicts with that science ought to be understood only in that way and no other. From the onset, this is a near impossible task, as the Quranic verses have always had a range of possible meanings, and Muslim scholars for the last 1,400 years have tried to explain the possible meanings of these verses. This is not to say that every verse in the Quran can be interpreted in an infinite number of ways without any parameters to limit the scope of meaning. There is, of course, a scope and a limit. Also, another distinction to take away is just like every statement of a scientist. It is not necessary that a scientific statement is being made by them, such as Stephen Hawking saying philosophy is dead, or Dawkins saying Darwin's theory makes them intellectually satisfied atheists. Likewise, not every statement of a Quranic scholar is a Quranic statement. Moreover, of the countless Islamic scholars that have existed in the last 1,400 years, there have been times when these same scholars have projected their understanding of nature into the Quran, rather than derive conclusions from it, similar to how some Muslims claim that the Big Bang is found in the Quran. Secondly, the science that is being used to challenge the Quran must reach certainty. Sadly, the history and philosophy of science shows this is not the case. Science does not give us truth, rather workable models which are always changing. This is due to problems within the philosophy of science, which leads to scientific conclusions always being liable to revision. There are three pertinent problems that philosophers have highlighted. First, the problem of induction, which means that you can always get a new novel observation that can challenge a firmly held theory. Second, undetermination of theory by observation, which means that you can have multiple interpretations or theories using the same data. Third, the problem of unconceived alternatives. There are alternatives to our best theories which are not brought to light as they are conceived due to our conceptual limitations at any given time. Philosophers have been vocal in their opposition of truth being linked to science. Philosophers of science, Gillian Barker and Philip Kitcher, drive the point home in their book, Philosophy of Science. As they say, quote, "Science is revisable. Hence, to talk of scientific proof is dangerous, because the term fosters the idea of conclusions that are graven in stone. It is important to make distinction here about scientific theories and direct observations. Direct observations like the shape of the Earth going around the Sun, layers of the atmosphere are obviously certain and won't change. However, scientific theories always can change. To drive this point home, it's worthy considering a thought experiment. This will show not only people like Ridwan are wrong about claiming science has disproved the Quran, but it will also refute those Muslims who claim that the Quran is a scientific miracle. Right now, as it stands, the consensus in physics is that the universe is expanding, and there are Muslims who claim this proves the Quran is a miracle, and because the Quran also states that the universe is expanding. Quote, "And the heaven we built it with might, and we are lamusi'un" in Surah 51, ayah number 47. The term lamusi'un is usually understood as meaning expanders. We are its expanders. The word heaven is taken to mean the universe, and to be the object of the action of expanding. And thus it is claimed that this verse shows that the Quran has revealed that the universe is expanding. However, these Muslims are pinning one particular meaning to lamusi'un, when it has a scope of meaning beyond this. Lamusi'un can also mean in Arabic vast or ample, meaning God made the universe very big and spacious. The problem is that if this is a miracle, then only one meaning should be possible, that of the universe expanding. If it can mean expanding or large or both, it is no longer miraculous. That is one reason as to why this verse is not a scientific miracle in the scientific sense. And another reason is that how do these Muslims know that the science that tells us the universe is expanding is not going to change? Just because there is a consensus today doesn't mean it will hold forever. Imagine Ridwan in 2070. He lives in a time when physics has gone through a paradigm shift, and the consensus is no longer that the universe is expanding, but rather that it is static and eternal. Ridwan 2070 will dig up the works from Muslims, including some scholars of 2019, and will then claim that the Quran is wrong, as it claims that the universe is expanding, when in fact it is not. We see here both Ridwan 2070 and some Muslim apologists are making the same mistake.
Number 58. Stars are near. The Quran's author thought that stars were very close to us, right here in the heaven above us, in the nearest heaven. This is a myth about 7 heavens, where the stars are in the closest heaven. Gladly, in a separate report, we are told how thick one heaven is. One heaven has the thickness of 500 years of marching.
The lowest heaven is the visible universe, and Ridwan objects to there being stars in the closest heaven. We have no way of estimating the size of one of these heavens. So Ridwan arrives at the conclusion by quoting a hadith that says that each heaven is a distance of a 500-year march. However, it isn't a prophetic hadith, but rather a quote by Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. The Quran does not state the distance of the nearest heaven, nor does the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To keep it simple, the lowest heaven is not the atmosphere, it is the visible universe, everything that has stars.
Number 56, 7 heavens, and number 55, 7 earths. The Quran says in multiple verses that there are 7 heavens or 7 skies above us, proving Allah's power. This can't refer to galaxies or solar systems, of which there are billions everywhere, not above us. It can't be universes, because by Muhammad's description, one heaven is not even big enough to reach the closest star.
We are in agreement with Ridwan that the 7 heavens are not simply galaxies, universes, or the Earth's atmosphere. However, he cannot force a contradiction with modern science by using the 500 years of marching hadith. No, Ridwan, the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not say this.
The Quran also speaks of 7 earths, but there are no earths below us. Some thought later this refers to 7 planets. But the number of planets in our system is not 7, and there are millions of planets in the universe that we can see.
In regards to the 7 earths, it seems like Ridwan assumes that they are earths like the earth that we live upon. There's no reason for this strange interpretation. All that we know of the 7 earths is that they are below the ground that we live on, according to various hadiths of various ratings. We are unsure of how they look like, what they constitute, what their size is, or at what level of the earth's inner part they can be found. Modern science is unable to dig through every single part of the earth, especially taking into the account that we've basically not even scratched the surface when it comes to digging up the planet. Also, scholars mention that the 7 earths could be referring to a division into 7 continents. What God defines as a continent or an earth can logically speaking be different as to what we define as an earth or a continent, depending on what we mean by this, and depending on the social and environmental conditions that lead us to differing conclusions about the numbers of continents and layers of the earth or such.
Number 39. The sun indicates shadows. What would you think if someone came and said, "Isn't it amazing that shadows are not static? They move. And the sun seems to be an indicator for them." Wow. In all honesty, what would you think of that person? What if it was the Almighty Allah? Have you not considered your Lord, how He stretches out the shadow, and if He willed, He could have made it still. Then we appointed the sun as a guide to it. Then we withdraw it to ourselves gradually. Shadows are just the result of the lack of light. A shadow is darkness, the absence of light. If sunlight doesn't reach a spot, you see what we call a shadow there. What is the Quran talking about?
Ridwan projects an ignorance upon the Quran that is unwarranted by suggesting that the sun is a literal causer of the shadows. Ridwan, you do realize that the shadows were not limited to sunlight, right? Fire was a source of light too, and it would be an indication to shadows as well. So what is meant by the sun indicating shadows is that it is referring to time. We even find this in prophetic traditions, that time was measured by the length of one's shadow.
Number 37. The sky has no rifts. Another sign that Allah is almighty and perfect is that the sky has no crack, no rifts. The actual problem here is that the sky is not an object and can't have cracks. The sky is merely a series of layers of atmosphere, gas. We only see it like a dome. There can't be a crack in what we call the sky.
Ridwan creates a false definition and projects it to make the Quran contradict reality by arguing that it says that the sky is solid. It doesn't say that. Even with this definition of the sky being made up of gas, when it should be defined as the fabric of space and time, there is the mathematical possibility of wormholes opening within the sky.
Number 36. The sky is a ceiling. The Quran literally tells us twice that the sky is a ceiling. Some say, well, it is. I mean, meteoroids don't get through. But that's not true. Meteoroids simply catch fire when they enter our mesosphere because there are many gases that light the meteor up through interaction. Many meteoroids do enter the atmosphere, become meteors, then land and become meteorites. The sky is not a ceiling or anything alike, not a protected canopy.
Firstly, the verse does not mention that the Earth's atmosphere is solid. Also, does Ridwan understand that if a canopy is penetrated by a rock, that it is not a canopy? The protective nature of the atmosphere is established scientifically. Isolated incidents of it being penetrated does not take away from this function.
Number 35. Sky with pillars. Since the Quran thinks that the sky is this object above us, this ceiling, it also gives us another sign, which is that the sky just stands there by itself, without pillars, or without pillars that you can see. So maybe it has no pillars, maybe it does, and we can't see them. The point is, it doesn't need pillars. Here again, the Quran clearly implies that the sky is this object that should be standing on something.
After establishing that the sky is indeed like a canopy, there is nothing strange about it being referred to as a canopy that is raised without pillars. Again, there is nothing in the verses that points to the atmosphere as solid.
Number 31. The heaven and earth were joined. Some claim that in the Quran there is a miracle of accurately describing the Big Bang. This supposed miracle is found in chapter 21, verse 30. It reads, "Have the unbelievers not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joint entity, and we separated them, and made from water every living thing?" Aside from that, this Quran verse is plain wrong, and there is not even anything to argue with or to debunk here. It is just talking nonsense. The heavens are not a thing anywhere, except outer space, which is nothingness.
Ridwan is basing his whole attack on the Quran on the premise that the heavens are nothing, that they are void, that they are a vacuum. But this is simply wrong, because space itself can stretch and curve. There are even gravitational waves which can be experimentally measured. Only because you can't touch it, Ridwan, or feel it, Ridwan, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The Quran merely says that the heavens and the earth, which is something that includes space, time, and matter overall in the universe, was once joined in a single point, and then later separated as are known separate entities. You should go back to the basics of physics before addressing the Muslims on anything, Ridwan.
Number 30. Earth before heavens. It is he who created for you all of that which is on the earth. Then he directed himself to the heaven, and made them 7 heavens, and he is knowing of all things. The Quran tells us that Allah created the earth first, before he created the heavens. In reality, the earth came into existence after outer space, and after the sun, after the galaxy, after many other stars.
Ridwan is arguing that the Quran suggests that the earth was created first. However, the Quran does not say this. The verse itself mentions that the sky was already in existence before the earth. What occurs after the creation of the earth was the formation of the 7 heavens, and not the initial creation of the 7 heavens.
Number 29. Heaven was smoke. While we're here, let's also pick this sweet narrative that the heaven was smoke. The smoke thing here is completely pointless. No such thing ever happened. The heaven is again not a thing. And there can't have been a smoke either.
Here again, Ridwan demonstrates his scientific illiteracy. The universe actually had a stage in which there were primordial gas clouds that, through gravity, slowly formed into stars, galaxies, and our solar system, including the already spherical Earth. Smoke is a mixture of gases and particles, which in light of the scientific knowledge that we have, is the right word to use. I mean, come on, Ridwan, I knew this pretty much when I was 10.
Number 27. Mountains prevent earthquakes. And the Quran even claims that these mountain things prevent earthquakes. That's why they are planted into the earth. Now I get it. If you look for credible sources, you easily find that many mountains cause earthquakes, normally, because they are just part of the plates under us. And with movement, they can cause earthquakes. This is one of the biggest hoaxes in the Quran that many people in our time actually believe in.
Ridwan starts off by claiming that the Quran says that mountains are meant to prevent earthquakes, which is not the case with the verse. The operative word is tamid, from mada yamidu. This word could mean to shake, to incline from side to side, or to sway. The interpretation of it inclining from side to side, or to sway, as if it's being affected by waves, is a more accurate interpretation. While this might be a shock to Ridwan, we do set an example of land being set firm without shifting due to mountains. For example, when it comes to the islands, they are kept from swaying back and forth, inclining or sinking, due to the fact that they are actually the tip or the top of mountains which are pegged to the ocean floor that stabilizes them.
Number 25. You can't pass the skies. The author of the Quran would be in shock if he saw space travel today. The Quran implies that you can't do that. You can't travel through the regions of the earth and the heavens. O tribe of jinn and men, if you are able to pass through the confines of heaven and earth, pass through them. You shall not pass except by authority. Some say the verse says you can only do it by Allah's authority, and Allah has given us the authority now, but that is a very poor defense.
There's two ways to go about this. First of all, the first heaven, as we have mentioned previously, is whatever includes stars due to the Quranic verse in Surah Mulk. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح. And indeed, we have adorned the nearest heaven with lamps, or stars. It is only logical to conclude, then, that the first heaven is whatever contains stars. So people landing on the moon or sending satellites into space certainly does not mean that they have broken the regions of the heavens and the earth. And not only that, but Tafsir ibn Kathir mentions that this means the following. You will never be able to escape Allah's orders and decrees because they encompass you. You will never be able to avoid or avert His rule and judgment over you. You are surrounded by it, wherever you may be. This is also about the gathering when the angels, comprising 7 lines in every direction, will surround the creatures. None of the creatures will be able to escape on that day.
Number 21. Winds for good tiding. If you live in the desert of the 7th century, you might appreciate every rainfall, because it barely rains and you have drought. The Quran says that Allah sends winds as a good tiding before His blessing, which is rain. But wind doesn't necessarily come as a good tiding. People in rainy areas who experience heavy, destructive rainfall would call this anything but a good tiding or a blessing. Imagine you have severe floods and your business and your home is ruined. But Allah says this is a blessing and a good thing because desert dwellers like it.
Had Ridwan read the Quran 3 times, he'd realize that the Quran often speaks of wind as a means to destruction. One example can be found in Surah 41, verse 16. Also, I find it hilarious that Ridwan actually thinks that there's an actual rule that winds cannot come before rain. Have you ever heard of a gust front? Do I really have to teach you basic high school geography? A gust front is a natural phenomena that occurs when a cloud formation of a thunderstorm causes a downrush of air that spreads out onto the ground, wherein an edge forms at a reasonable length in front of the thunderstorm. You absolute ignoramus.
Number 19. Rainwater is pure. The Quran also says that rainwater was pure. Allah's blessing, rainwater, was thought to be pure at the time of Muhammad. But when it forms in the air, it interacts with carbon dioxide in the air and is contaminated with carbonic acid. In regions where there is more pollution, natural or man-made, it is much more contaminated. But even in the cleanest places, rainwater is not free from contamination and should normally be purified before you can safely drink it. It is not pure water. This is a false assertion based on the knowledge in the Quran's time and place.
During the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? Actually, this is a common view today. There are multiple articles online today that state that rainwater is perfectly fine to drink. This also has to do with a concept in logic called fuzzy logic, a type of logic where the truth value can range between completely true and completely false, something that Ridwan probably never read about. One person could say that the water from a bucket in which there is sand at the bottom of it is pure because it hasn't been contaminated by urine or something similar. Another person, however, might demand that the bucket must be emptied of sand, as the sand will mix with the water depending on what they need to use it for, and therefore the water could be impure. Regardless of that though, the standard for determining the purity here is that the water is drinkable, and people have been living for thousands of years depending on rainwater. Heck, our water comes from rainwater at the end of the day due to natural cycles even today. What is being said in the verse is that the water falling on the earth is not contaminated with materials that would make it non-drinkable, which is something that God can do. Also, the water can be used for the two Islamic rituals, ghusl and wudu. So this has a Sharia aspect to it as well.
Number 14. Barriers between seas. The Quran speaks in 3 verses of a separation between 2 waters. In one verse, it mentions that Allah put a barrier between sweet and salty water. And in 2 other verses, it says that there is a barrier between the 2 seas. There is no place on earth where 2 seas don't really mix into each other. And there is no place where 2 waters, salty or sweet, don't mix. They only mix below the surface and can't be seen from above due to their different qualities that they transfer into each other when they mix. The only thing the Quran could mean, and be kind of accurate about, is that the 2 seas, the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, are separated by land. Popular topic, which looks like a divine barrier. But can you really call this a barrier between 2 seas?
Ridwan, instead of focusing on refuting the classical understanding of the verse, which is that land separates sweet and salty waters, instead refutes a modern interpretation of the verse. This is irrelevant to the video since the Quranic verse is not scientifically inaccurate. The inaccuracy is found in the modern interpretation.
Number 13. All life is in communities. Quran chapter 6 verse 38 says that all living beings are in communities like humans. This has 2 interpretations. One is that they all live in communities, which is outright wrong, since many animals are completely solitary and hang out by themselves for life and fight and protect territory, like most bears, especially wolverines. Some are born alone, grow up alone, live alone, and die alone, like sea turtles.
In this point, Ridwan conflates between a group and an ummah. He mentions the example of the lone wolf living in isolation. This is only problematic due to Ridwan referring to the lone wolf as a group. The verse is referring to an ummah. An ummah, which roughly translates to nation, usually consists of large numbers of individuals. However, this isn't always the case. There are exceptions actually, such as the Prophet Ibrahim, who is literally referred to as a one-man ummah in Surah 16, verse 120.
Number 12. Everything in pairs. According to the Quran, everything comes in pairs, in mates. This is far from the truth. In reality, we have many animals that don't mate, that don't have 2 sexes. We have those that reproduce by themselves. We have animals with 2 sexes, more than 2 sexes, 1 sex, etc. The New Mexico whiptail is only female, for example, and reproduces without mating, which completely debunks the Quran's claim.
We'll get to this in more detail in point 11. But basically, Ridwan here argues that the Quran is saying that all species include males and females. The Quran doesn't make this claim. Major early Quranic commentators like Mujahid said that the 2 pairs here are referring to matters like disbelief and belief, sadness and happiness, guidance and misguidance, night and day, the sky and the earth, mankind and jinn, etc. In other words, it is not referring to biological sexes.
Number 11 and number 10. Plants in pairs and fruits in pairs. In fact, we can go ahead and count 2 more mistakes and dismiss both of them with the same explanation. Neither plants nor fruits have necessarily all 2 mates, or a limit of 2 mates, and many reproduce by themselves, like dandelions.
Here Ridwan conflates the term pairs with the Arabic azwaj. Azwaj, which is the plural form of zawj, is not referring to sexes, it is referring to groups. Take for example, Surah 56 verse number 7. Which refers to 3 groups of people as azwaj, the same word. This is not a reference to sexes, and this is sufficient proof against the idea that azwaj has to refer to pairs. Azwaj should be translated better as complementaries.
The statement about fruit is completely ridiculous. There is no such thing as fruit coming in pairs. There is no accurate interpretation to this. There is no A apple and B apple. There is no male apple and female apple, or male pear and female pear.
The verse states that Allah spread the earth, made unto it mountains, rivers, and fruits. Then Allah said, He made in it 2 pairs. According to one interpretation of the verse, Allah made the fruits into 2 pairs. According to another interpretation, Allah made 2 pairs onto the earth, not fruits. According to this understanding, Allah is referring to His creation of mankind and not His creation of fruits. This view is adopted by linguist commentators like Al-Farah and Ibn Ashur. And besides that, why does Ridwan keep constantly insisting that this has to mean sexual pairs? There are commentators back in the early periods of Islam that commentated on these verses by saying this refers to two types of smells, two types of colors, and etc. Two types of anything that can be found in a fruit.
Number 9. Milk from livestock is pure and agreeable. The Quran claims that milk from livestock is pure and agreeable. If we go with cow milk, for example, most cow milk is infected with bad bacteria and needs to be pasteurized. Besides, 75% of humans are lactose intolerant, and that has been around for over 10,000 years. And if you are lactose intolerant, then you can't get around it. No matter in what condition the milk is, as pure as possible, dirty or pasteurized, it won't be entirely agreeable with your body. Some Muslim sources will tell you that you will be fine if you drink raw milk, but that is only because otherwise Allah's promise will be broken, as it is in reality.
Ridwan is clutching at straws here. He doesn't realize that this is a simple verse about milk being pure despite coming out of intestines. Instead of finding digested material or blood in the milk, we instead find pure milk. Is milk easy to drink? Yes. Lactose intolerance is irrelevant to the discussion.
Number 8. Milk between filth and blood. The Quran also says that Allah gives you milk to drink from between filth and blood. Delicious, fascinating, magical. This probably sounded fascinating to early Muslims. In reality, grass is very naturally processed and turned into milk, far away from any filth.
Ridwan seems to believe that the Quran says that the milk comes exactly between a tube of blood and another of filth. The Quran doesn't say this. It says that all of these can be found in the stomach. That's it. Why did I even put this on the list where I have to refute it? I mean, oh my god.
Number 7. Sperm comes from between backbone and ribs. Where does sperm come from? Does it come from the belly, breasts, ears, eyes? We know it comes from testicles. But according to the Quran, it comes from between backbones and ribs. Because what the Quran says is clearly nonsense, there are some theories on what this verse could actually mean. The text says that a gushing fluid, of which man is made, sperm, comes from between backbones and al-Taraibi.
At-Taraibi? At-Taraibi? What the hell? My Arabic professors would have kicked you out of the classroom. At-Taraib. Yes, are the ribs.
Some interpretations played with this last word, but fundamentalists and others agree that this refers to the man's ribs. So sperm comes from between backbones and ribs, which is complete nonsense.
Also, what the hell, Ridwan? Semen doesn't come from the testicles. And the word as-sulb is translated by Pickthall, Dr. Ghali, Mufti Taqi Usmani and Al-Mawdudi as loins. According to modern physiology, semen is made up from fluids from the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland. All of these are located between the ribs and loins of a man. And even if we were to take it as if it means backbone, it still wouldn't change the fact that when two people have sexual intercourse, the place where these fluids emerge is between the backbone of a man and the ribs of a woman, or vice versa.
Number 6. Sperm equals human. In reality, a sperm is not really a human. A sperm out of millions goes into a mother's uterus and encounters the ovum from the mother. The two contribute half of the future human's genetics and together create a zygote in the uterus, which then becomes an embryo. If a different sperm reached the uterus, it would still be you.
The Quran does not state that the human being was a sperm. It merely speaks of man's humble origin. In Surah 76, Ayah number 2, the Quran is referring to man as nutfatin amshajin, which is a combination of the sperm and an ovum, i.e. a zygote, which is proof that the Quran does not define the human being as a sperm.
Number 5. Gender after clot. In a more obvious mistake, the Quran even tries to tell us that whether we are male or female is determined long after we become a clot. In reality, the sex of a person is already determined at conception, because it merely depends on the chromosomes that the sperm and the egg of the mother contribute. We only see the sexual features a few weeks after, and the author of the Quran thought that it magically happens through Allah and an angel.
Here we can see how Ridwan does not realize that the same material he's quoting in order to try and strengthen his arguments ends up refuting him. The creedal determination of the sex occurs in the unseen world, where an angel writes down the decree of what a person is going to be like in terms of their gender, spiritual, and financial states, which is what the ayah is talking about. Not only that, but even talking from the point of biology, the differentiation of external genitalia occurs only a few weeks after conception, which is also what the verse could be talking about. And lastly, if Ridwan wants a verse about biological gender determination, he may just refer to Surah 53, verses 45 to 46, which state that gender is determined in the sperm.
Number 4. Sperm becomes blood. According to the Quran, the sperm, become a clot of congealed blood. This never happens. The egg inside the mother that is fertilized with sperm forms a zygote, a cell that grows within the uterus and becomes an embryo. This is not a clot of blood.
Sperm becomes blood? Ridwan selectively chooses a translation that gives the impression that the drop of fluid turns into blood. This is far from truth though. The Arabic states that the nutfa turns into an alaqa, which is a clinging substance or a leech. The transformed drop, or the alaqa, does actually look and function like a leech too.
Number 3. Flesh after bones. In another failure on biology and embryology, the Quran explains that Allah creates of sperm a clot, then a lump, then of that lump bones, then those bones are covered with flesh. This is plain wrong. Flesh or muscles don't form after bones. Flesh and the tissue for bones form simultaneously.
For this section of the video, I'm just going to include a clip by Nabil al-Khalidi, or Learn Quranic Arabic, who can explain it better than I can.
Number 2. 8 types of livestock. In 2 occasions, the Quran claims Allah created 8 types of livestock for humans. It goes on and counts those as sheep, goats, camels, and oxen or cows. It counts these 4 types as 8, including male and female. The problem is that the Quran's knowledge suffers from the geographical limits of its birthplace. People in Arabia didn't have deer as livestock, for example.
Ridwan is conflating between an'am and livestock. Livestock, by definition, can encompass horses and pigs as well, which were known to the Arabs. Is Ridwan going to argue that the Quran is not aware of their existence too? Do note this as well. What is defined as livestock by one culture or civilization might not be defined as livestock in another, due to the nature of different types of usage of animals in different types of environments. At the end of the day, these taxonomical categorizations are subject to different conditions and environments and cannot be used in a fair argument against the Quran. It might be that a civilization categorizes a horse into livestock and another doesn't. For example, the United States. It includes the horse into livestock. Many other countries do not.
Number 1. The earth is flat. And it is He who spread the earth, and placed therein firmly set mountains and rivers. He causes the night to cover the day. And the earth, we have spread it, and cast therein firmly set mountains. He who made for you the earth a bed, and the sky a ceiling, and sent down from the sky rain. It is He who has made for you the earth as a bed, and inserted therein for you roadways, and sent down from the sky rain. And at the earth, how it is spread out, the Lord of the 2 easts and the 2 wests. He spread the earth, and Allah has made for you the earth as a carpet. Doesn't it sound a bit like the Quran imagines earth to be this bed, or this carpet, spread out and flat, above which there is a ceiling, a dome, a canopy, and Allah sends rain from that dome? What about the sun that moves around the earth? What about all the other points we have seen on this list? Today's apologists might explain all these Quran verses in some ways, and say that all the references to the earth as a flat bed or a carpet just mean to explain that the earth under our feet is flat to a human, so we can walk and build on it.
First of all, we cannot be 100% sure in all cases as to what the word ard in the Quran refers to. This is why the context of verses is key for us in deciding the meaning of the word ard, or translated as either earth or land. Secondly, Ridwan quotes verses where the Quran mentions how the earth is spread. The word spread does not indicate flatness for a thing. For example, we see that a fire spread throughout the forest. Is Ridwan going to tell us that all fires are flat lines of flame burning only on the ground? I don't think so. When it comes to the verse that says the earth is a bed, this is not explicit language and cannot be used to conclude that the earth is flat. The reason the word firash is used, which means something to recline on, or a bed, is simply because the earth is comfortable to walk on. It is not filled with just spiky terrain that we cannot traverse. We are able to rest on it. Also, this could be referring to the desert land, because sand is something we can lay upon. The same logic applies to calling the earth a carpet. In other words, the earth is walkable. As for the verse in Surah 88, or Surah Ghashiyah, its context refers to the Arabic landscape, and the proof for this is that the Prophet is being addressed afterwards and told that he is not a controller over them referring to the Arab pagans. And the word sutihat, although it can mean to be flattened, also can mean to spread.
But early Muslims did believe that the earth was flat. A famous commentary on the Quran gives us insight on the sentiments of Islamic scholars in the 15th century and says that most scholars agree that the earth was flat. About laid out flat. This on a literal reading suggests that the earth is flat, which is the opinion of the scholars of the revealed law, and not a ball, as astronomers claim, even if the latter doesn't contradict the pillars of the law.
Radwan then quotes Tafsir al-Jalalain, the Tafsir of the two Jalals, in order to argue for an Islamic scholarly consensus of the earth being flat. Radwan makes two major mistakes here. First of all, Tafsir al-Jalalain is a linguistic tafsir and not a tafsir of belief or law, which are one of the many types of tafsirs we have. Secondly, the two Jalals were people that lived in the 9th century after Hijrah, or the 15th century CE. Earlier scholars such as Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Hazm provide us with the idea that there is a consensus among scholars that the earth is actually spherical. Fakhruddin al-Razi says the following in his Tafsir al-Kabir, volume 19, page 131. Quote, "If it is said, do the words, and the earth we spread out indicate that it is flat, we would respond, yes, because the earth, even though it is round, is an enormous sphere, and each little part of this enormous sphere, when it is looked at, appears to be flat. As that is the case, this will dispel what they mentioned of confusion. The evidence for that is in the verse in which Allah says, and the mountains as pegs, in Surah Naba, Surah number 78, verse number 7. He called them autad, or pegs, even though these mountains may have large flat surfaces, and the same is true in this case." In other words, what the Imam is saying here is that when we use language such as the mountains are pegs, we're not saying that these things are literal stakes put into the ground. As for the Quran itself, there is nothing in the Quran that is completely explicit about the earth. Some verses can be used to mean that it is flat, while others can be used to argue that it is a globe. For example, Ibn Hazm uses the word yukawwiru, used in Surah Zumar, verse 5, in regards to the earth being covered with day and night as evidence, since takwir, which is the infinite form of yukawwiru, has always been used by ancient Arabs for something being wrapped or folded around a round object such as a turban. You never use yukawwiru for wrapping something around something that is not round. And finally, it is extremely important to note that the root kawara of the word kawara yukawwiru only occurs 3 times in the Quran. In all 3 times it refers twice to the earth and once to the sun, which are both round objects. It is safe to assume, based on this evidence, that the Quranic view is that the earth indeed is a sphere and is round. Looks like that's it, comrades. It's been a fun ride. With this video, I think we can all conclude that it really is worth it to stay away from Radwan. May Allah bless you all. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.